I'm gonna say this. Yeah,
This lemon is
I wanted
useful.
to villain share this.
I'm glad I
wanted
brought
to
this
villain
lemon out,
share
bro.
this episode because I wanted to spend some time. You know, what is the actual argument? I think most people, when you ask them right now, the average person is, let's not get involved in this conflict.
Yeah, can
like,
I offer
shouldn't
that
jump in.
perspective as
Yeah.
probably the least informed on this as the three of us? I don't trust Israel. I don't trust the United States government when they say a country has weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
They said that when we were kids and we got locked into a 20-year war
Yeah.
that has put us massively in debt and killed however many hundreds of thousands of people in buildings. The fact that they're like, oh, Iran's about to have a nuke, that's why we got to kill them and attack the country. It's like, dude, no.
You can't fool me twice.
You're the boy who cried nuke, and we've already checked for the nukes several times. I don't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
I don't get, and then like you said, it's off the back of Israel, Palestine. It's just I think the level of trust in Israel's decision making, I think, is an incredible low. And my sense is I don't want anything to fucking do with this. Get us out of the Middle East.
20-year war, 20-year war, he said. We were only in Iraq for
and that's
10 and a bit.
And that's, again, that's the uninformed view, but I would suspect the vast majority of people agree with me and are like, not a fucking another war in another country that supposedly has a weapon, which, by the way, Tulsi Gabbard, who's the director of national intelligence, said, according to the U.S. international intelligence, that they are not developing a nuclear bomb. That is from Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
So it's not like unanimous of like they have a nuke or anything.
So
it's maybe.
We live, I think collectively, we live in the shadow of 9/11 and the consequences of it and the things that led up to that as well. But we all remember the two wars that we got stuck in for so long that almost everyone agrees we shouldn't have been doing that.
Yeah.
With Iraq specifically, I think if you ask people if we should have invaded Afghanistan, I think people are a little more back and forth on it. But it is rare to find someone. I can't think of anyone I've met that was like, yeah, Iraq, solid call.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever talked to that person.
No, that's why I think you bring up a really good point here, Doug and Aiden, is like, it's easy to look at like the Ayatollah in Iran and say, this is a bad regime. Like what they're doing is repressive, or what, people, there's tortures and killings and political prisoners. But I just want you to understand that Iraq, Saddam was not a good guy either, right? But there's like a long history of countries like saying, well, we gotta have a regime change here. And it never I can't think of a single example in history where it doesn't blow back. It always has, but this time will be different. But it's, everyone says it this time. It's like the
even more
Arrested Development.
Lemon, Gaddafi and Libya. That's my understanding too. We overthrew basically helped overthrow a regime in Libya, and that happened more recently. In the 2010s, and the consulate in Libya in bad shape after the fact.
It just creates this weird power vacuum that gets filled with even more fighting, and usually, Israel having the military capability to possibly topple the regime in Iran, because they are weak right now, it seems, does not mean they have the capability to manage or run or the moral authority or any type of authority to be able to have the long-term effects of that. So I
want to build sort of this argument that I was looking into and point out some things here, because I was curious for the people who are really pro intervention here still, after everything we just talked about, why would that be the case? And I say this as someone who also thinks personally, I don't want to become involved in this conflict. I don't want more people to die. I come at this from a perspective of the human death and suffering in war feels like a horrid thing.
You have to hold the lemon to say death and suffering is bad.
No, I don't even need to be holding the lemon for that. I just come into this. I want to be so explicitly clear that I'm a guy trying to figure this out, like you listening to this right now are, and I don't want more people to die and suffer. So why would someone be pro for this conflict? The first thing that to start it is the nuclear weapon question. I wanted to come to what you had said. Yep. The U.S. Saying that they aren't close to a nuclear weapon, or at least more mixed opinions from our country on whether or not they're close to a nuclear weapon, is countered by the fact that Israel's intelligence is saying that they are much closer to a nuclear weapon than other people understand or know. and they are insisting that that is the case. And that intervention, collectively, no one wants Iran to have nuclear weapons. And that isn't just Israel and the US, that's other countries within the Middle East. That's Saudi Arabia, that's Bahrain, that's UAE, that's even Qatar, who has pretty more interlocked business relationships with Iran than a lot of these other countries, does not want Iran to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I mean, broadly, every country on earth doesn't want any new country to get a nuclear weapon other than themselves if they don't have it. Nobody wants anyone else to have a nuclear weapon because it just increases the threat and the problem. And all nuclear powers want nobody else to have them. Everyone that doesn't have one wants only them to get it, and then no one else. That's where we're at. Because,
and there's no country that has nuclear weapons has ever been invaded, right? Like directly, that's kind of the thing. Is like once you get to that point, you're now at the level of deterrence of, it's the same reason that we aren't, well, at least a reason that America hasn't like pushed into Russia directly, because it's like you can't poke the bear too much. But now there's a lot of bears all over the fucking world, right? Like the instant they get it, like your options are massively limited, right?
And I think, the recent thing with Ukraine is a reason why it's become urgent for countries like Iran to push towards it. Because Ukraine had nukes, then gave them up as part of a strategic security peace deal that they were agreed to with all these sides that nobody honored after they gave up the nukes, and then Russia invaded them, and then so they wish they'd kept their nukes because they would have less chance of being invaded. And other countries are learning that lesson, that the words don't matter as much as just having the nuke, and that's why there's been a push for it from a lot of different countries that didn't have it before. It's not a good thing. This is all kind of scary and bad, but like this is why there's a why for everything, and that's why we get to where we're at.
So in the position that
don't worry, guys, I've got a wacky segment later.
We're gonna get wacky after this.
So in the position that Israel's in right now, they see this as the prime opportunity for a lot of the reasons that you laid out to finally take action. There won't be retaliation from the other proxy groups in the region. They have at least a tacit, I wouldn't say support, because other countries in the region have spoken out against their instigation of violence or their attack on Iran, but they have more of a relationship with the other countries in the Middle East than they used to, and a lot of those other countries don't really want Iran's sphere of influence to be significant either. These other places like Saudi Arabia, places like Bahrain, places like the UAE, and Syria has basically fallen, or the old Syrian regime has fallen. Russia is distracted by the current war that they're caught in, and Iran in a relatively weak spot because of the effect of sanctions over so many years, economically a bad spot, and also the relatively weak responses and attacks of Iran in 2024. So seeing that Iran was not as powerful as they initially threatened themselves to be, at least that's a viewpoint of a lot of people involved in this conflict. And then from Israel's perspective, they have a U.S. administration in place that they feel is possible to pressure into the conflict. Like Trump is on better terms with Netanyahu, or seems more malleable on that side. So they believe that this is a time where they can convince the U.S. to come and support them in the conflict. And then also within Israel, from my understanding, is unlike in Gaza, as an example, there is more political division within Israel for how Gaza is being treated and dealt with. How the consequences of that conflict are more divisive to average Israelis, but the support for attacking Iran and protecting itself from Iran, or at least they all view it that way, is massive. The support within Israel is really, really strong for conflict with Iran specifically. So all of these factors have come together for them to feel like this is the prime time to take advantage of this. And if you exist outside of Israel, or if you're one of these, let's say, neocon warmongers who is super pro getting involved in a conflict, even at this stage, your outlook on this might be expanding the U.S.'s sphere of influence. So our resources are getting increasingly strained as time passes. Our debt is ballooning, And a lot of this goes towards being this global police force, right? Which, if from a perspective, like benefits the United States, and that's your reason in maintaining this geopolitical position as America, right?
Right.
So you, as America, would have a chance to take advantage of all these factors I just laid out, help Israel overturn the regime within Iran, and introduce a hopeful stability to the region that by getting rid of this one massive power that has managed to shake up things for so long, you leave Israel and Saudi Arabia in the region intact as the powers who can effectively manage and police the Middle East, because Iran is no longer a factor. And then you get to take your resources out of the Middle East and start stockpiling and securing Southeast Asia and China in the future conflicts that are seen to be in Asia. This is the geopolitical argument that I have found online for why it matters to the United States so much to stop Iran. It's not just boiling down to whether or not they have a nuclear deterrent or a nuclear weapon. It's this being stretched in, finally allowing other powers that are allies to successfully control this region, getting a lot of the resources out of the region on your own that you can then spread to the other conflicts and fronts in the world that you that you want to handle. And I thought this is a very interesting. It's weird because it makes me feel like I really am looking at the game of life and the world as a game of like Risk.
Right.
It is this incredible movement of human beings and countries as pawns in order to accomplish a goal, which is maybe that's what all geopolitical decisions are. But that was the most like convincing argument I could find of like, if you really care about maintaining the longevity of the US's sphere of influence, this is your reason to get involved in this conflict. It's like your one time to overthrow this power and bring balance to your approach like elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, it's tough. I have read that take in general. And you could say that the dream outcome for someone who has that line of thought is that there's there's an uprising in Iran because the leadership is now weak or they're being bombed. And there's a new democratic government and they're friendly in a way that Syria sort of is coming right now after Assad with the West and Israel and Saudi Arabia. And then suddenly Iran's brought into the fold. And now you have this strategic choke point over China where at any point, like if they go crazy or attack Taiwan, you can cut off the Strait of Hormuz and cut off their oil.
You cut off the oil that's going out to China.
So like that's the dream scenario. But as we talked about with Iraq and all these examples, it's like it never works out in the dream scenario. It almost never works out in the dream scenario. And almost certainly that you just build this deep, deep resentment because of your meddling, because of your involvement, because of your bombs.
That's the piece I can't get over is like, it's one thing if this is like an unprompted.
Yeah, if it did it themselves.
But with every one of these countries, like, okay, after a century of Western countries just fucking their shit up, they want to get revenge, and we can't let them get revenge. It's like, I don't want them to nuke anybody, but fuck, man, I don't feel like we have the moral authority here at all,
Yeah.
Ugh.
That's what's tough about it.
It's a hard time imagining that the answer is let's dig ourselves out of this hole. Like, let's keep fucking it up, and this time it'll work out.
Yeah.
I think that's a hard sell, because I think that's the question that you have to answer at the end of all of that explanation. This is wild. I think you're listening to three normal people try to parse this situation as best as possible. I don't know what's going to happen. Our president is firmly in the camp of maybe I will, maybe I won't. So like it's
as unfirm as you can get.
And one thing I wanted to throw on the end of this before we move on is I watched a few videos and about Tehran specifically and just people visiting and being tourists, because I think a vision of the Middle East and the people in the Middle East that we are often sold is the version that we saw during these wars, which is like dusty, desolate, not very developed. And I think it is easy, especially when we talk about numbers, to not think about the human consequence of things. And I was watching these videos of people, exploring Tehran, experiencing the culture, meeting people, and I was surprised by not necessarily by how modern it was, because a lot of it was modern, but how many women were walking around without.
Yeah, I heard there has been progress.
Headwear, and it's like, if you want to wear that, wear it. If you don't want to wear it, don't. That's what I see. It's like it should be your choice to be able to do it. And this is, I think, from the version of events that we were told, like, this isn't to absolve the regime. This is just like, it's more just the enforcement of it.
And my understanding is that the regime is just getting weaker and more resisted against, especially in major population centers like this city. Like, they're just not caring as much about the authority they have to crack down on this stuff. Now that they've softened their stance.
And I think it's just important to remember that your version of how you see these places in your head might not be accurate, and also all of the people that live in these places are just regular human people trying to get by, who don't set the sanctions and don't develop the nukes and don't talk about invading. Like, it's I don't know, man.
But dude, you say that, Trump tweeted like, Tehran better evacuate tonight or something like that. I want to get the exact words right. Maybe you could look it up, Perry, but the idea that a city of 9+ million or whatever can evacuate, like, is absurd. So that was bananas for a president to tweet. It's not a feasible thing. It's not possible. You cannot do that. It's not.
It didn't follow up with anything. There's no point.
There's no follow. Yeah,
mass chaos and confusion and fear.
Like
why
implying you're gonna bomb Tehran to rubble or something, and there's millions of people in there, and then also, the idea that absolves you, like, I told him to evacuate. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's not a.
I think that about.